Alrighty, so welcome to the training to become a Snapshot Day site leader. So Snapshot this year is on August 10th. We're having our training today, May 2nd, and we're happy you're here. As we go, if you have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat, but also know that as I go, I have stopping points to stop and have people ask questions in the chat that I can address, or you can also unmute during that time. And then I also want to open those little question breaks as a time for if there's any site leaders here that have done the event before and you have any advice for what's worked well in the past, then we can use that time for you to give little ditties of advice as well. I also want to preface this with saying that this is a lot of information. And so just know that, we're recording this today so you can go back to it. We have handbooks. I'm going to be sending email reminders for things, and you're also always extremely welcome to contact me. So if any of this feels overwhelming and if this is your first time, I don't want you to worry about that because I have your back and we're going to make this successful no matter what. So let's dive into this. I can't remember if I said my name's Emily Heald. I work for UW Extension. It's nice to see you all here today. So I just wanted to start with a little bit of history of Snapshot Day if you're not familiar. So this event, it's been around for a while. It started in 2014 and it was focused on detecting aquatic invasive species. We're going to call them AIS here. So we were originally focused on detecting AIS in rivers, specifically near bridges where folks are more likely to dump their aquarium species. So it's now expanded. It includes lakes and wetlands and rivers and streams. And it started out primarily coordinated by River Alliance, but now it's been migrated to be coordinated by UW Extension. But we still partner with the DNR, the Citizen Lake Monitoring Network, and then, of course, all of y'all who are here today are lovely site leaders and all of the volunteers. Sort of a little interesting tidbit is that Snapshot Day has a sister event, and that occurs on the same day in Minnesota, and they do a similar AIS search on their waters. They're looking mostly for starry stonewort. That's why they have sort of a cuter name of Starry Trek. But they're thinking about expanding that program to include all AIS. So we'll see how they do that this year. The goals of the event have not changed over the years in spirit. You probably don't even notice this, but they did change slightly. We wanted the language to be a little less fear-driven to align with our AIS outreach communication efforts. So during Snapshot Day, we hope to identify new populations of aquatic invasive species, thereby helping to prioritize future monitoring and management locations. So this is an example. The word populations used to be infestation, so we're just adjusting that a bit. And then with our volunteer engagement, we want to educate new audiences about invasive species, inspire them to act, and then we want to recruit long-term volunteers for your programs too, for things like the Citizen Lake Monitoring Network, Project Bread, all of that. And so the way that we're achieving these goals is that we have a whole host of site leaders across the state. And this is a map from last year, and these site leaders are holding local events to educate these local volunteers on how to identify and monitor for AIS. And then we send those volunteers out to predetermined monitoring locations to collect data. So that's why we're here today, to teach you how to be a site leader if you're brand new, or to refresh you on how to be a site leader if you're a seasoned Snapshot veteran. We do have a couple new updates this year, so it's not all going to be the same information as last year. And as a site leader, you have a few responsibilities that we're going to go over in pretty specific detail. So broadly, we're going to cover each of these in their own sections, but broadly, those responsibilities are to plan ahead for the day, assist in outreach, and assist with volunteer recruitment. You're going to be hosting the event the day of and leading the training and identification. And then after the event, we ask our site leaders to do data entry. So let's break those down a little bit more. So with planning, We would like to see you attend or watch the Site Leader webinars. Check Gold Star for you. You're doing it right now. And then you'll also need to select your monitoring sites, find a training site for the day of the event. We ask you to coordinate your volunteers and provide some supplies. Some are provided by extension, and we'll go over that. And then when doing your volunteer outreach and recruitment, you'll promote your event locally using the resources we provide, recruit a few volunteers, and if you want, you can seek out local sponsors to provide refreshments, but that's not necessary. And then hosting the event the day of, you'll assist with training volunteers in the morning of the event, and then you'll help them to verify species and enter data into SWIMS. And you'll send copies of all your forms and data sheets, and you'll submit photos and voucher specimens as needed. And again, we're going to go over all this. So, yeah, I understand at first it sounds like a lot, but there's no panicking here. We're going to help you out along all the way. We're providing training here. We're going to provide some supplies. We have a ton of new promotional and outreach resources in the AIS partnership box that I'm going to show you. We have protocols. We're going to centralize your registration. And so it's going to be fun. So speaking of the AIS partnership box, if you are not familiar with this resource or you haven't had access to it, please send me an email and I will make sure that you get access to this. It's just a file sharing website. It stores all of our AIS resources, including a folder on Snapshot Day that you can see circled here. So within that folder, there's a ton of information. I have folders from past Snapshot days if you're interested in seeing some historical information. And then there's also a Site Leader resources folder, and you'll see that all these folders here that are available for you within there that are related to volunteer recruitment and recorded trainings and training resources and data sheets. Everything you need, I have it all organized in the box for you. So as you're doing Snapshot Day here, planning for it, a series of steps is going to occur here leading up to the main event. And here are the dates listed as a reminder. You're welcome to jot them down, but I'm also going to tell them to you in email as well. The timeline is similar to last year. And when I sent out the post Snapshot Day Site Leader survey, most folks said that this timeline works well with them. So I'm using it again this year. Think about if this year, if it works for you, and if not, then I'm going to be asking for that feedback on the post-event survey again. The biggest difference with this timeline is that we moved Snapshot Day up a week from when it normally is. So it's on August 10th this year. Usually we have it the week after. So just because that date's moved up a week, a couple other things have shifted around just a little bit. So Site Leader training, that's happening today. You're going to commit to being a site leader by next week on the 10th, and then you'll have to select your monitoring sites. That'll be due May 31st. I'm going to send out an equipment survey and ask you what you have, what you need, so that I can gather equipment for you. I will then send you that equipment. I put July 22nd-ish. I'm going to let you know when those go out, and you'll have it on time for your event. And then we have some wrap up with the data entry and voucher submission. I did extend the data entry deadline to allow for 2 weeks of time to do data entry instead of just 1 week. That was from Site Leader feedback. So it'll take you about the same amount of time. So I encourage you to enter data sooner than later. But if you need leeway, hopefully that helps you out. I know it's a busy time of year. And again, I'm going to be sending email reminders with these dates too. So we're going to go into detail on these steps. So now the first thing is that after this training, if you haven't already, you need to commit to being a site leader if you're willing to lead this event. A site leader agreement, it's basically just you letting me know your contact information so that I can coordinate with you and give you updates and information. It helps me create my email contact list. I already sent out a Google form for you to fill that out. If you need a link to the site leader agreement, please let me know. Many site leaders, I know this, are seasonal LTEs and interns. So if you're having a seasonal staff coordinate this event for you and you know that, but they are not hired yet, That's totally fine. You can just use your contact information for now so you can stay in the know. And then let me know when that person starts and we can change the contact information to reflect the right person. During the sign up process to be a site leader, I do genuinely need to know your meeting and training site location during the sign up because I cannot promote your event without that information. So if you put something like TBD in the training site location, I'm gonna have to come back to you anyway and ask for more information, and it can delay things. So we just want to make sure we have all our info in one place. Speaking of training sites, you'll need to choose a training site where you're going to host your event. So this is your central location for the day of, where you'll meet your volunteers, you train them, and then they reconvene after they go out monitoring. So it's really good to consider having your training site in a central location in relation to your monitoring sites. And some things to keep in mind when you're choosing your training location: you want it to be accessible and inclusive in terms of places where, perhaps wheelchairs and mobility limited folks can access. We don't want anyone hiking through the woods for 2 miles just to get trained to identify invasive species. And you likely will not have to pay for a fee for a location if you plan it right. If you do it at like a public park or anything like that, you shouldn't be having to pay fees. And it's also nice to choose a location that already has things like picnic tables and garbage cans, so public parks. It's just less that you have to plan for and carry around. And so, that being said, good places to have training sites are park pavilions. Just make sure you check with who maintains the park to see if you need to reserve it. Folks also do boat landings if there are picnic tables or like a grassy side area available at that boat landing. Outside your office location, if that's available for you. Outside always seems to work nicely, but if it comes down to it, you can also reserve like a library room at most public libraries. We just ask that wherever you do the actual training on identification, I strongly, strongly recommend holding your training at a place that has easy access to water. So we send out surveys, like post-event wrap-up surveys to volunteers as well. And based on those surveys, volunteers really need you to demonstrate the full protocol for monitoring with them. They want to see it and do it with you first before they go out and do the monitoring. And so it's very important to be by water so you can demonstrate those protocols. So here are a couple examples of past training locations. You can see this training down here in the lower left was held at a boat landing that has some nice picnic tables at it. So it's a nice little display area. In the bottom right, you can see that's at a public park area where people can gather and have picnic tables. There's a little pop-up tent that they brought for that one. And then I also wanted to show an example of an indoor location in the top right. This person's utilizing electricity in this one by using a PowerPoint training inside, which is fine because this location also right outside there was water access, so that worked out well for them. The next thing you want to do is choose the sites that you'll be sending volunteers to monitor. So you'll want to choose sites where you can verify past AIS reports or potentially locate new AIS. So those sites could be downstream from a known AIS population if you're monitoring on a river or flowage and want to see if something has spread downstream. They could also be high use sites that are just maybe more likely to have AIS introduced to them, or sites that just no one has been at for a while and you want to check up on them. And just keep in mind again that the sites should be easily accessible. We want to create a positive experience for those volunteers. So we don't want to be sending anyone down super steep slopes or sites that have poisonous plants. We're going to avoid those. And it's okay to choose more sites initially than you think you need, and then narrow it down based on the weather or the ability of your volunteers or the number of volunteers that you get. Usually 4 sites is a good medium goal for the day of. And then just keep in mind that those monitoring sites, I'm going to ask for them to be due on May 31st. And once you register to be a site leader, I'll send you out a Google spreadsheet for you to give me your monitoring sites. So as you're going through the process of finding those monitoring sites, make sure to check in with your DNR regional AIS biologist. If you do not know who these people are, I included a map right here of their coverage areas. These are DNR regional AIS biologists that are here to help you out. They could have some sites in mind that need to be sampled, and they could make suggestions on good sites for volunteers to visit. Just let them know where your training site will be so that they can suggest sites that are nearby the training location. And they're a really great resource for other Snapshot Day things, like if you need assistance with SWIMS data entry and specimen vouchering, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So great resources, these coordinators. Again, if you don't know who yours is, here's a map of their coverage area. And if you need their contact information, those are available on the DNR website, or just shoot me an email and I'll connect you with them. I did have a past colleague share some of the pre-planning his LTE intern has done for this event, and I thought it was kind of a cool idea, so I wanted to share it. This seasonal staff member, she went out to scout sites and took notes and made detailed notes to help her out more on the day of. So she was able to rank all of her sites in order of, easiest to get to and walk around, especially if they're stream sites. So you could also rank them by priority if you want. And that was so that she could work with mobility limitations on the day of. So she took notes on the site name and location. And then she also has notes here of things like access is easiest from the north side. There are rocks to climb around. So things like that. Those are good notes and things to keep track of as you're determining your monitoring sites. After that, we're going to have to work on volunteer recruitment as the event gets closer. This was something that a lot of site leaders asked for assistance on, so we're going to go over this in a little bit more detail. If you want to start promoting the event now with some save the dates in short articles, you can go right ahead. Just know that volunteer registration opens on June 3rd, so that's also a great time to start promoting more heavily, because at that time you'll have the sign up link that I make for volunteers to register. So in that box, AIS box that I mentioned, as usual, we're going to be providing the social media outreach toolkit, and that gives you access to press releases, pre-written press releases, social media templates, pictures, winning lottery numbers, just for an incentive for you to check that out. And based on the volunteer surveys, a vast majority of volunteers find out about Snapshot Day from social media. So I know it's not everyone's favorite thing to manage Facebook and Twitter and write press releases, but it's actually really important for getting the word out, and we're doing most of it for you. You just have to hit, publicize. So please make sure you utilize these resources. We give those resources to you, and we do some of our own statewide promotions, but it is ultimately your responsibility to do local promotions and marketing for this event. So aside from social media on your own organization's site, you can also share with other groups or reach out to other groups. So you can attend local meetings or submit newsletter articles to groups like Trout Unlimited. There are a lot of paddling groups, scout groups, lake associations, local TVs, really good groups to reach out to, master naturalists and master gardeners. If you would like to get some sort of sponsorship for refreshments, it's really not required, but if it's something you'd like to have, you can reach out to local cafes, outfitters, and local grocery stores. If you reach out to a big box store, they're likely to need several months heads up, so keep that in mind. And then also, if you get a sponsor, let me know. I'll help recognize them on our promotional materials. I also want to talk a little bit about this new outreach and media calendar. So this is a tool that I made this year to help you with promotions and hopefully get some more volunteers at your sites. This is just a screenshot of what it looks like here on the left. The whole thing is in the box and available for you. It has some, more vague timelines and some specific suggestions, and you are very welcome to follow it exactly or modify it based on your own needs. So it's just a tool to help you along. And the goal of this calendar is to give you some insight into what I do on my end to advertise the event statewide, and then give you tips on how you can best utilize what we do and the offerings that we provide to maximize your advertising. So it shows things like our social media posting schedule, when I plan on sending out statewide press releases, when I suggest for you to send out your press releases, and it really is just a guide. It's not written in blood. And this is new this year. I love feedback. So if you have any, if you like it, if you don't like it, if you have suggested changes, I want to know about all that at our wrap-up survey. And even if you just go along here and share Facebook posts throughout the year, it's going to help you a lot. I've seen some of your social medias. I see you share posts once in a while, but maybe if we really hit people over the head with it gently and lovingly, we can get some more volunteers. So this document is in the box for you to utilize. And if you have not done so already, please have yourselves or whoever does your marketing in your organization follow the AIS Facebook page through UW Extension. The goal of this page is for us to create content that you just have to share. So for most of the year, this Facebook page is general AIS content. And then for most of the summer, it's going to be almost entirely Snapshot Day. So you can follow us there, and we're going to post multiple times a week. You can just hit your share button and easy done. You've done your marketing. So like we did last year, volunteers are going to register through a Google form, and I'm going to update a Google Sheet for you to inform you of the volunteers that registered at your site. It'll include their name and contact information, as well as any equipment that they're available to bring. We ask that of them when they sign up, and I will provide you with a link to that spreadsheet once it's ready. So volunteers also prefer for you to contact them about 2 weeks ahead of time. And at least a week before, make sure you're contacting folks and confirming start times, directions, reiterating how to dress, what supplies you might need them to bring. And I just want to make sure that you check that Google Sheet in advance to see how many people self-identify with protocols that they're comfortable with. So we ask them when they sign up, are you comfortable getting in the water or not, so that you can best plan your event around that. For those emails of contacting volunteers, this year I created a template for you to use for that. And where is it? You guessed it, in the box. You are very welcome to write your own emails, but I did make this template that already has language in it that you can use. It has highlighted sections for you to fill in your own specific details. So we just want to make sure that we're making it easy on you and having consistent communication across the state. So in the past, I did not require site leaders to include me on those pre-event emails, but this year I would really love for you to CC me on those. CC me on it when you send it, or forward it to me after you send it. And that way, if you have a confused volunteer or last minute registrations, a lot of times those folks come to me with those questions, and this will just help me best direct the volunteer where to meet you, because some parks are really big with a lot of meeting options and picnic tables, and I can't always tell, exactly where that volunteer should go at those parks. So again, keep in mind, there's something for everyone to do here. If they're not getting in the water, they can be note takers, specimen collectors, assisting with cleaning gear, all those sorts of things. So this is, I know, very tiny font, but I just wanted to show you an example of what the sheet looks like when I provide you your registered volunteers. I do update it daily on weekdays, and so what I'll be giving you is the name, contact information for your volunteers. I group them all together based on location. We list here the items they can bring, and then we ask them if they're comfortable getting in the water, if there's any minors coming with them, if they're under 18, things like that. So a good goal for volunteer recruitment is broad. It really depends where you are. Rural areas tend to get fewer volunteers, but we still see rural areas get quite a few volunteers sometimes too. It's nice to have 2 to 10 teams with 2 to 5 individuals per team. So anywhere from 2 to 20 volunteers. I think that it's easiest to manage around 10 volunteers. So if you get lots of signups, make sure you reach out for help. We can find maybe another conservationist in the area that might be able to assist you. Interestingly, volunteers have reported that they actually really like the small group sizes. They say they learn more if they have more of your direct attention. And then continuing on with our planning phase, we also need to think about the supplies that you'll need. So we're going to provide some things, but the things that you will need to provide are tables for registration and specimen display if they're not provided at your training site. You'll also need some sort of a decontamination station to make sure you're not spreading invasive species during this event. So we're going to offer some of those supplies if you don't have them already. It's also a good idea to have garbage bags for throwing away specimens that volunteers bring back. Clipboards for data, I have some available if you don't have your own. Hand scoops for sediment sifting are optional, but nice to have. We send out instructions on how to make those if you want to make your own. You can also use a net. And then again, refreshments are optional. Just know that this year, as part of the volunteer appreciation that we usually do, I will be sending out Culver's coupons for a free scoop of, it's not ice cream, what is it? Custard. So every participant will get a coupon for a free scoop of custard. An extension provides sign-in forms. I'm going to give you pre-filled data sheets on waterproof paper. I'm going to send baggies for specimen collection, ID resources, boot brushes for the volunteers to clean their gear. I can send you rakes, rope rakes as needed, and then also those volunteer appreciation items. So if you've done Snapshot Day in the past, you probably remember we used to send out tote bags for volunteers. We're not doing that this year. We spent the budgeted money on something I'm going to show you in a second. We can reassess bags after this year. If people come running and say they really miss the bags, we can reassess that. But yeah, we're still going to be sending stickers and Culver's coupons for you and the volunteers. So they will still hopefully feel appreciated without the tote bags, but we'll see here. The equipment that is provided by us is limited, so I'm not going to send all of this to everyone. I will instead be sending out an equipment survey in June that's asking what you need from us versus what you can provide. Just a little update. Here's the surprise on supplies this year. When I send you your supplies before the event, I'm also going to include several copies of the Wisconsin Early Detector AIS Handbook. So you've probably seen this one around before. It's the one that Paul Skowinski originally made for the Lakes AIS program. And him and I edited it, so it now includes more riverine species as well. And it also includes protocols for monitoring lakes and rivers, which are now the same ones that we use for Snapshot Day. So this booklet is really a one-stop shop for you. And we're going to be providing these to site leaders for volunteers to use because based on those volunteer feedback surveys, the volunteers said they would appreciate nicer identification guides that also include the native lookalikes. And this guide lists all the species that people can look for. It lists all their characteristics, and it shows the native lookalikes. So this was really highly requested and through those feedback surveys. So hopefully it's a useful tool for them. Just know that these books are not freebies for your volunteers. I would love to provide a free one of these for every volunteer, but I simply cannot. So think of these more as a lending library. You disseminate them to your volunteers before they go out monitoring, and then make sure to collect them all at the end of the event, and then they can be reused next year. So if volunteers want to purchase them on their own so that they can have something to keep, they are available through UW-Stevens Point for a small fee. And then when you're doing your planning and choosing of the sites, keep in mind that you will eventually need to communicate to your volunteers where the monitoring sites are located so that they can then go drive to the site and monitor. So that means on the day of Snapshot Day, you should be prepared to be able to direct people to sites. So a lot of people have had good success in creating maps to give to people with site information. You can try to make these detailed. I'm going to show you examples in a second, but just make sure to include, if you're making these maps, make sure you include some information about how to find those places, knowing that lake boat landings tend to have fire numbers and addresses, and streams and rivers often do not. So if there is an address or a fire number, make sure you're providing that along with the water body name and a map. And if there isn't an address for that site, if it's just a stream crossing, a GPS point is good that someone can put into Google Maps, pointing it on the map, detailed directions, you know, you get it. If you want the volunteer to be able to get there, you're gonna have to tell them how, right? Some site leaders also put their contact information on that sheet, which is a nice touch, along with any AIS that are already reported at those sites. So here's an example from Stephanie Boismanu up in Oneida County of I know it's hard to see, I had to scrunch it down to fit here, but a map that she provides of her sites to the volunteers. You can see she has labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then for each of these sites, she lists the name of the lake and their address and information on how to get to those. Another example from Rock River Coalition listed the site that they'll be going to. So this one's Lions Park Pond, that has a list of the known AIS already at that site. There's some access notes of where to park, a note on when to return to the meeting location, and then this site leader also listed their contact information in case anyone had questions while they're out on their own. And then here's another example I quick flashed you earlier. You can see this person put maps with parking points at them for stream access sites, the notes on any steep rocks to climb around, previously verified AIS, and then again, this person's contact information and a reminder to take photos along with a lat long of the site. And I did create a template for these as well, and that is in the box for you. So, but it's basically just like a big blank space for you to put your own map in. So there's still a little bit of work for you to do at this end. So I know that was a lot of information so far. So I want to stop for questions. I do see that there is a question in the chat from Bob asking, will you be able to help us develop a poster to use at local libraries to recruit volunteers? Yes, indeed, I will. I will be creating posters again this year with your site-specific information on them for you to put up anywhere you want around town. Yeah, so you can utilize those however you need to, and I will put those in the box and let everyone know when your posters are available. Thank you for that question. I did not mention that. Are there any other questions or comments on things that have worked well for you in the past at all at this point? Okay. So we're going to move on. You made it through all the planning. We're going to fast forward. It's August 10th. It's the big day. What's going to happen? So here's a suggested agenda for the day of. You can modify it a little bit based on your local needs, you know, by a half hour, maybe here or there. But for the most part, we would like you to stick with this timeline. It makes marketing much easier on my end. And so from 8:30 to 9, volunteers can arrive, you know, gather their packets, etc. Basically just kind of gearing up and getting there and settling in. And then from 9 to 9:45 or so, we ask that you provide a brief AIS training, and that's going to be based on locally relevant species of your choosing. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. There's absolutely no need to go over all of the target species that we have with volunteers. Volunteers are by no means required to remember over 20 species. You know, we just want to teach them a handful at this time. And with that training, we want them to get an idea of what they can look for so that they can grab any suspects, right? We don't expect them to be experts on Eurasian water milfoil. We just want them to know generally what to look for so that they can grab anything suspect. You'll also go over safety, monitoring protocols, how to fill out the data sheet, and then how to clean your gear off between sites. We send them out to their sites from about 9:45 or 10 to noon, and then they have to reconvene at the training site to go over their data, look at specimens, double check data sheets, things like that. And you can really use this as a teachable moment. And so if they bring back native species, show them how to ID those too. They're going to be interested in pretty much everything they find out there. So again, some flexibility with the schedule, but please keep it as similar as possible to this so I can advertise consistently. And you also must communicate with volunteers in your communications what this schedule will be, because someone on the volunteer survey last year indicated that they showed up at 8:30 to their site expecting for it to start, but this site leader had planned for 8:30 to be the settling in time. And this person was really disappointed that they had to sit around a little bit until things started at 9. So we just want to be clear to let your volunteers know exactly what to expect and when. So when folks go out, we have that list of 25 different species that people can look for. Again, volunteers do not need to look for all 25. You are very welcome to modify this species list based on your local needs. So for example, if you're monitoring mostly at bridge sites, looking mostly for aquarium release species, maybe your training is more focused on those species more commonly found in aquarium dumps. So if you know that your site is downstream from some sort of snail infestation or population, you'd cover that. In the box, I'm going to have a host of training and identification materials to help you out. You're welcome to make your own. You can utilize those booklets that I'm going to be sending. However you want to train your volunteers is totally fine. I'm also going to be hosting a recorded volunteer training that briefly goes over a few of these species, and it'll go over the monitoring protocols. So volunteers, they don't all have the time to watch a training video before they attend the event. It's kind of unreasonable to expect that of everyone, but some of them will attend that or watch the recording so that they have a little bit of background information, but you're going to be training them more thoroughly on the day of. Bottom line here, modify the species list based on your local needs and do not require volunteers to be able to 100% identify everything. That's your job with the help of the regional coordinators or AIS biologists. So 6 to 7 species is a good goal for identification. Anything more, you're likely to overwhelm a volunteer. So if you showed them this whole list of species and tried to train a volunteer how to identify all these, probably not going to get them to return for your other events. And you would just run out of time. Who's got the time to learn how to identify all these in just a morning? So choose a couple that are locally relevant to you, and you can teach those to volunteers. All right, so protocol time. We're going to go through this monitoring protocol step by step. Just go through this protocol from start to finish with your volunteers before sending them out on their own. Show them the whole process of getting to the site, show them about throwing the rake, filling out the data sheet, all of that. Volunteers want that. They told me. This is also going to help you when you start to break people into groups if you show them these protocols ahead of time, because when you're clarifying the different roles, volunteers will get a little bit more of an idea on what they're comfortable with. So we had some survey respondents indicate that they were not as comfortable throwing a rake as they thought they would be. And so we want to show them what that looks like. So, someone can throw a rake, someone can record data, etc. Just be thoughtful about abilities when you're breaking people into groups. So step 1 of monitoring. You arrive at your site. It's going to be a lake or a stream or a river. And the first thing you're going to want to do is identify the boundaries of the area you're wanting to sample. So your search is going to start at one end and end at the other. Usually 50 to 100 feet's a good goal for the sample site length, but if you want to sample a little bit more or a little bit less, that's fine too. It's really going to depend on your site conditions. People have a hard time visualizing 50 to 100 feet. So 50 feet is about the length of a semi-trailer or a megalodon, whichever one resonates with you the most. And we recognize some boat landings are really narrow. Sometimes they're just a gravel road leading down to a lake. Some stream access sites are difficult or might be narrow with vegetation or brush conditions. So again, we just modify this length based on our site. So as you work from one end of your site to another, you're going to stop 5 times, try to stop 5 times when you space those sites out as equally as possible. So if there's a dock or a pier, those are really good places to stop at, even if they're not evenly spaced. So make sure we're prioritizing docks and piers here. And again, we can modify the number of stops based on your sites. So if you're at one of those really narrow sites, you might only need to stop 3 times. I've had that happen when I've led snapshot days in the past myself, where the shoreline was really inaccessible because the sediment was like super soft and mucky. And so there wasn't a lot of room to move around. So we just did fewer stops at that site. So for each of these little stops along the way, you're going to do the following. You're going to stand there and scan the area for at least 30 seconds. If your area is really heavily vegetated, you're probably going to have to scan longer, but if it's just straight up sand, 30 seconds is probably totally fine. And then if you have hand scoops, you're going to use those, or just use your hands to pick up some sediment and sort of start like sifting through it and peering through it, seeing if you can find any, small animals or plant fragments. If you are sampling strictly from the shoreline and cannot access the water directly, it's fine to skip this step. We ask you on the data sheet that I'm going to show you a little later if you did this step. And then we have the old rake tossing that Snapshot Day is kind of known for. So at each of your stops, you can throw a rope rake into the water twice. That's what this diagram is showing. Once a little bit more to the left and once a little bit more to the right. And then if you're using a dock as a stop, just make sure you walk to the end of the dock to throw that rake. You can sample right at a boat launch. Just be careful of other boaters, obviously. We don't want to get in anyone's way or create an unsafe situation. But I also want to mention that these concrete slabs at boat landings can be pretty slippery sometimes. So I like that this picture is showing this person sampling off to the side. And then also know that some sites might not make sense to use a rope rake. So check out this site here on the left. It's a really thin site or a narrow site. Can you imagine throwing a rope rake amongst all this brush? It would just be not necessary. And then if you feel comfortable and you can do so safely, people can wade into the water to get a better look at things. But if they want to stay on the shoreline, that's totally fine. And I just want to reiterate again, things are going to look a little bit different depending on the site you're at. There's not a one size fits all here. It's just one size fits best. So you might have a dock, you might not. You might need a rope rake. You might only have access to a long-handled rake like this person is doing on the picture on the right. Or, like I mentioned before, your site just might be too narrow for a rake at all. So that's why those pre day of event visits are important. Scope your sites out before you send people to them. And then after each monitoring station, before you move on to the next, make sure you instruct those volunteers to stop and decontaminate their gear. We're going to have them follow those basic steps of not spreading invasive species. So we're going to remove attached animals and plants. We're going to get all the mud off your equipment and shoes and waders. Scrub the equipment with a brush, which we're going to provide to you. And then rinse the area with a water or bleach solution. So we can also provide spray bottles to you if you needed. If you have a steam cleaner, you can lend those to volunteers, or you can even have the steam cleaner at your training site at the end of the day to steam everyone's gear. It's not necessary, but those are things that are options for you. Are there questions on the protocol itself at all so far? It's thundering out in Madison. Let's move on. So I want to give you a couple reminders about safety when you're out there working and monitoring. So if you're working at a bridge or a stream crossing, you're likely to be working on a road right of way. So first off, know that as long as you're staying in the right of way, you can access a stream, but right of ways can vary quite a bit depending on where you are. So my best advice for you, there are some averages of the length of the right of way, but I truly don't even want to give you a number, because what I would love for you to do is to look at your county GIS site or call the local highway department and ask them the full extent of the right of way. We don't want to be guessing or assuming. So that's for land. Once you're in the water, as long as your feet stay wet, you should be good. I do see in the chat that Steph asked if there are any recommendations for brands or models of steam cleaners. I do not have one offhand. I have one in my storage room and I cannot for the life of me think of the brand of it offhand, but if anyone has any experience with steam cleaners that we can toss in the chat, let's all learn from each other here and toss your recommendation in the chat there for steam cleaners. With safety, the biggest thing is common sense, but sometimes we have to repeat common sense things to people. And so, I don't want you behaving all silly like just to get an extra sample point in. So let's make sure that we don't get in the water if there's a fast current. We don't want volunteers walking through overly soft sediments. We do not encourage deep water treks, especially if someone's wearing waders and there's a risk of topping them over. That can be very, very dangerous. We don't want folks walking down steep banks or overly rocky and heavily vegetated banks. We're going to avoid dams. We're really only going to do what you and your volunteers are comfortable with. So if you're working in an area with traffic, consider wearing a safety vest. Also consider not working in an area of high traffic, right? And just a little tip here for if you're at a stream station, at each station, make sure you walk downstream to upstream for visual purposes so you're not disturbing the sediments. And then a little note here about carpooling is that when volunteers are going to these sites and groups, they're welcome to carpool together, but that is so not necessary. They are very welcome to get into their sites and do to get to their sites with car sharing. But we did have a survey participant indicate that that made them feel really uncomfortable and they felt like they were pressured into carpooling. So just be clear with folks that they can drive their own cars. It's really not a problem at all. If there is an accident on the day of Snapshot Day, please make sure you're calling 911 first. And then make sure participants also have your phone number in case of an emergency. If you have first aid kits on hand, it's not a bad idea to hand those out to participants too, or at least have one back at your training site location. Sometimes the upstream, downstream thing confuses people. So just to review those suggestions, we suggest that you work upstream to downstream when moving among sites within a watershed. And that's to prevent those species potential AIS from spreading downstream to upstream. Okay, see that? And then at the individual monitoring sites, you're working downstream to upstream is like a visual aid. You're reducing, the disturbance in the sediment so that you can see better. And the data sheet that folks are filling out as they go is the same as last year, and there is one data sheet per site. I'm going to provide you those data sheets pre-populated as much as I can with like the site name and station ID, and those are going to be on waterproof paper. And then I'll pre-fill those when I send your supplies out, so you're going to receive those pre-filled data sheets with your supplies. And then the volunteers need to fill out these sections in blue here. So it's their name. We have metrics of effort. And so if you've done this before, you're probably familiar with us asking if the volunteer used a rake or a hand scoop for monitoring. We're asking if the volunteer walked along the shoreline. So that means, did they walk and look between those, those rake throwing points? And then we're also asking if they checked surfaces like docks and piers. So these are man-made surfaces to check. So we know this isn't available at every site. If your site does not have any of these surfaces to check, then you can just circle NA. And then the volunteer is going to fill out any of their suspect findings. So this column is labeled suspect species to take a little pressure off them so that they know they don't have to be the experts. So here they're going to list something like, Eurasian water milfoil. And then in the column next to it, the area and density. This is for what those volunteers can see. We don't expect volunteers to get into the water and do a full inventory of that invasive species. It's just, what's visible, so that in the event that they did find a legit AIS, it's mostly to give y'all as site leaders an idea of what you might be getting into when you follow up on it. And then they can also indicate if they took a sample or a picture and any comments they might have. And then the next section in pink is up to the site leader. You can indicate whether their initial identification was correct or not. And then if you need to submit a sample for a voucher specimen for verification, you can fill that out here as well. If an AIS has not been found in that water body previously, or if you are unable to identify a specimen, you will need to collect it for verification, or the volunteer will need to collect a sample of that. So we ask folks to try to collect up to 3 to 5 specimens. If it's a plant, we ask that you try to get the root system, the leaves, and the flowers present. This is not always possible, and sometimes the volunteer might need a garbage bag for things like Phragmites or knotweed. But, some volunteers mentioned this on the survey last year. They thought they needed like a shovel to dig up an entire plant so that they could bring like a big stock of potential Phragmites back to the site. In those instances, it's probably best just to take a lot of photos and good notes. The goal of grabbing a specimen is nice, especially for things, small invertebrates like snails. But, sometimes it's just not possible to get a full specimen. So we understand that. If someone brings back something native or something that's already been found at that water body, you can just throw that away. You can put plants in a garbage bag and label them as, ready for the landfill, throw those away. And then animals, they can be taken to the freezer for a little freezer nap and bagged and thrown away if you do not need them. If you need to verify something based on a photo and not a specimen, then that is when something has not been found in that water body. So that means we need to go a step further with reporting it as new in that water body. Or if you're unsure how to identify something, then we need you to grab a sample and take it to someone, one of your DNR biologists to show, especially if it's something like a snail that can be more tough to identify. If you are taking pictures, make sure that they're clear and focused. It's a good idea to have something for scale in them, like a data sheet or a pen. So you can see here, these are some nice photos of this rusty crayfish. You can see that spot. This person's got a data sheet in their photo, and then, hands can vary in size, but we can clearly see an adult hand with a very large snail in it here. So those are good examples of great photos. Here's an example of a very well-intentioned volunteer, but the photo is just really impossible to identify that snail. Here's another example of a picture that can be tough to identify. So we just want our volunteers taking nice, clear images for us. So then after each site, after that monitoring protocol, make sure volunteers know how to prevent the spread of invasive species. So it's a good idea to minimize teams visiting more than one watershed. And then, we do that work upstream to downstream within the watershed. Make sure you're providing that rinse equipment so that volunteers can scrub their equipment and rinse it after each site. And you should be demonstrating this at the beginning of the event to them. Show them all the little nooks and crannies that stuff can hide in their shoes. And then at the end, if you want to have like a super decontamination site at the end, you can do that. And so finally, we're going to be wrapping things back up at the training site. We're going to be identifying the things that volunteers bring back, determining if species need to be verified and vouchered. And then again, if you want to do refreshments, you can, but this is also a good time to hand out stickers and Culver's coupons to people. And so you went out, you collected your data. Now, what do you do with everything? It depends. Your regional DNR AIS biologist will get anything that you need to voucher. So give them those and they can be a verifier on it. And then if they want it, you can also give them copies of your data sheets. Most of them, I'm assuming, will not want it because we're going to scan them and have them digitally available anyway. Just a reminder here that you need to have 2 verifiers to confirm species ID. So if you're a verifier, that's super. If you have another staff member with you helping you out, they could serve as another verifier. But in most cases, that regional AIS biologist is going to need to help you out with species ID. And then I'm going to need you to submit a few things to the box. I'm going to make a folder for each site for you and send you links on how to find them. But basically, you're just going to be uploading scanned copies of your registration sheets, those completed data sheets. And then we also ask for folks to take a lot of pictures when they're out. All of these really lovely pictures that I use for training and promotions come straight from the site leaders. So the more photos you take, it helps me out, and it can help you out with your promotions as well. And then the week after Snapshot, the 2 weeks after Snapshot Day, there's a little bit of follow-up. You'll need to submit the data you collected into SWIMS. I'm going to show you that in a second. And then, like I said, we're submitting our vouchers as needed and data sheets and pictures to the box. If you want, if you know that you're going to be needing to work with that DNR AIS biologist afterwards, it's a good idea to set up a meeting with them in advance to help with that verification, because all this stuff does need to be done within 2 weeks so I can start reporting out on it. So we just want to make sure everyone has time for everyone else. So what goes into SWIMS? Pretty much everything. Even if you did not find any new invasive species, that's great information for us to know. Every site you monitor should be entered. So you're going to be assigned a Snapshot Day 2024 project to your SWIMS accounts, and the monitoring sites that you choose will be added to it. If you do not have a SWIMS account, or if you do not know how to use SWIMS, me or your DNR AIS biologist can assist you. And we're asking for everything to be entered by August 23rd. So the first part of data entry is going to look the same as last year's. You have your 2024 project selected up there, and you're going to be inserting the name of your data collectors. I just put mine in here just for an example, but it's legitimately important to include the names of the actual volunteers here and not just yours. I do add all of your volunteers to SWIMS so that you can select those in there. It just helps us when we're doing reporting, know how many volunteers were there and what kind of effort was out there and everything like that. Make sure your station name is matched up to where you're at. I add those stations to the project, your date and time, and then you can hit next. And then this lists all of the potential target species that you could be looking for on the day of the event. So it asks, did you look for Brazilian waterweed, curly-leaf pondweed, all the way down the list. And we're going to have you choose these drop down, choose yes if you taught your volunteers how to identify those organisms the day of your training. So if you did not teach volunteers how to identify Brazilian waterweed, then you choose no for that. If you taught them how to identify curly-leaf pondweed, then we choose yes. And then it asks for your methods on the bottom. it really lines up with your data sheets asking, if you use a hand scope, use a rake, things like that. And if you did not find any AIS at the site, use the bottom box to enter that. It says no target species observed. If you did find AIS present, then there's a button at the bottom that says species found, and you can enter your data for that station. Let me see here. And then on the next, when you're entering AIS found, again, it lines up with your data sheet. So you enter the name of the species. And on this sheet, we're only entering confirmed AIS species here. So if someone found something native, we're not entering that. So you choose the species that you found. This drops down to be, a list of all the potential species. And then we write in the estimated area and density. And it's going to ask if you collected a sample and took a photo, and then it's going to ask who you submitted those to. If you found another species at the site, you can hit, there's going to be a button for you to hit next species found, and you do the same thing. Otherwise, here you can just hit save and return. And then finally, this is how you guys we're almost done here. I'm very proud of all of us. One more thing that I want to mention is to follow through with your volunteers, either like within the same day or a week or so later through email. And based on those volunteer surveys that we've gotten over the years, something that is consistently coming up is that volunteers do not want to just collect specimens and then go home. They really want to learn more about invasive species, and specifically what they want to know is, what happens to the data that they collect? Are you going to use it for anything? Do you have any plans for it? Maybe if you found purple loosestrife, if it's a site that you're doing biocontrol at, you can tell them about that. If it's something that has to be reported as a new population and have future management, you can tell them that. Are you going to be going back for a more thorough survey? Can they come back and help you pull something? Is it something that just has to be monitored? And then they also really want to know, like, is there a future way for them to become more involved? So can they help you come out and remove or pull something? And then how can they help you out in the future? You can, put them on email lists for future projects. Many of them say they leave thinking, now what? So they just want a little more follow through. How could they participate maybe in Clean Boats, Clean Waters, or the Citizen Lake Monitoring Network, or Project Red? So because this was so mentioned by those volunteers about that follow-up, there are templates provided for you in the box again. You just have to swap out some of the details with your own. And then also know that once all of the data are submitted to SWIMS, we do create these lovely data summary infographics. These are all from last year. I had a talented intern create these for me, and I just have to put data into them. If you want to see an example of these graphics from the past, we have those on our blog site, wateractionvolunteers.org/blog. And we write up a little bit of a blog post at the end. We make these nice graphics and put in nice pictures from everyone. And then we send that link out to the volunteers and send out press releases and things like that to promote the event as a very fun and successful day. So with that, I want to take some questions. I have contact information listed down here. If you'd rather talk offline, we can set up a Zoom or a phone call and chit chat. Questions along the way, you're welcome to contact me. I'll also be following up with emails and sending you everything that you need to know with deadlines and links and everything like that. So if anyone has a question, we're welcome to put it in the chat or unmute. I do see that Kendra asked here, do volunteers check a box for photo release when they register, or is this included on any of the other forms? That's a really good point, Kendra. When they do register, I do have a checkbox that says, I can't remember the exact language offhand, but it basically says, like, I acknowledge my photo will be taken, or I do not want my photo taken. And that information I put into the spreadsheet that I give to site leaders so that they know which of their volunteers do not want to pick their picture taken. Welcome, you're welcome. Are there any other questions? Everyone feel good about that? All right. I'm going to stop my recording here.